Well, what's better, letting them die on the street slowly or inflicting a little bit of harm now by taking their rights away so we can get them in a place where we can take care of them?
Welcome all to Yamhill County Truth Seeker. Today we're honored to have back on the show McMinnville City Councilman Chris Chenoweth. Welcome back to the show, Chris, and thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
The topic today is homelessness. It's a topic that comes up all over the country all the time. Do you locally have a grasp of the numbers and severity of the problem right here in the McMinnville area? Is local homelessness and the problems that go along with that on the increase? Do you have a sense of that?
Well, what I can say, when it comes to homelessness, we have to identify who we're actually talking about, because you'll often hear really large numbers regarding the number of homeless folks, whether we're talking in Yamhill County or we're talking in Portland, wherever you're talking. When we're talking about the unhoused, the numbers can be widely disparate, and so we need to focus in on who we're really talking about when we say quote unquote the problem. The two groups, one way to define them is the invisible and the visible homeless. And the much larger number by far and away is the invisible. This is your couch surfers. This is your battered wives looking for a place to go. This is somebody who's down on their luck. They just lost their job. These are folks that have friends or family that will help and assist them, but they really need some help to get up to the back on their feet and get going again. And predominantly, we're able to help those folks in a lot of different ways. There's a lot of services available. Yamhill County is doing a great job in trying to reach out to them. YCAP reaches out to them. Those folks typically get the kind of services they need and typically are not the ones we're talking about when people start complaining about homelessness or the unhoused in their community. The ones that they're typically talking about are the visible ones. And those are the ones you see in McMinnville along Dustin Court, Marsh Lane, McDaniel, over by the dealership, the Toyota dealership, kind of down in that area. Those are the folks that typically is what cause the complaints. And so in terms of numbers, I really couldn't give you an accurate number. I would say the ones that are causing us problems number less than 200 people.
Wow.
But that would be my guess.
And there's really not much change in terms of what the city is doing, although it sounds like the police are more cooperative and coming in and doing a more thorough cleanup and posting. Actually, I've seen some signs recently, and I think that they are related to the type of vehicles that can be parked in certain places, like at the public library.
Yes, so we as a city, so first, this problem really came to a head starting about 8 years ago. I ran the first time of almost 5 years ago. And it's been cyclical ever since it started. So what I mean by that is the problem would go away. Well, it came to the surface probably around 2016, 2015. Lots of homeless people got frustrated. I think Adam Garvin, when he ran the first time for city council, actually ran on this issue. That's how long ago that this problem has been going on. And the city will step up and do something, and then the problem goes away. Maybe they increase enforcement, maybe they pass an ordinance, whatever the case may be. They realize that there's an issue that needs to be addressed. The problem goes away for a little while. Then it comes back a few years later. They do something. Then it goes away for a little while. Then it comes back. People get wound up. The city does something, and it goes away for a little while. And that's kind of the cycle that we've been in. Right now, one of the things they did in 2018, they passed an ordinance that said folks could sleep on the street as long as they were, I think the hours were gone. They could sleep starting at 9 p.m. and had to be gone by 6 a.m. So overnight. And that had to do with trying to meet the requirements of the decision by the Ninth Circuit that said you had to allow folks to sleep in public places if there was no other place for them to go.
I was just looking that up. I think that's House Bill 3115, and I think Tina Kotek, then representative, was the chief author of that.
Well, that one was changing, put the 3-day limit on us. So we have to give a
Okay.
3-day warning before we move anybody, and that's that
Mm.
now still. But originally we had a 1 day, and that cleaned
Okay.
everything up for a little while. Then Cotec did that to us, and now we have to give them 72-hour notice before we can remove them. Well, they're
Mm.
playing games with us, so we passed an ordinance that said they could, when they move, they have to move at least 1,000 feet. So
Oh
they
man.
were in the system, right? Well, then they were staying in the parks. And so the signs you're seeing are specifically the city decided we were going to pass an ordinance that would, or actually, I don't think it's an ordinance. I think it was a rule done by Parks and Rec um, that said that the unhoused could not stay the night in our city parks anymore. And the library parking lot is part of the city park, down the main city park. Um, so any city park now has those signs. They're not allowed to stay there anymore. That moved them up out of the parks, back onto Dustin Court, Marsh Lane, and McDaniel, and over by uh, our local dealership, Toyota dealership. So, and they move around. They're playing this game. The problem is going to be: are we willing to always enforce, or are we going to keep doing this cycle where we enforce for a little while, the problem goes away, we quit enforcing, the problem comes back, we enforce again. You know, I'm kind of old school. I still look at things through the eyes of some great quotes that I've read through the years, and one of them was by Reagan. And that quote was, you know, it's amazing what can get done if we don't care who takes the credit. The city has argued that they were always working on these problems before the citizens came to them. So it really wasn't the citizens' pressure that caused them to start enforcing. They were already
Mm.
going to enforce. And the citizens say, well, you know, really, they weren't going to do anything until we started putting pressure on them. Well, there's probably truth is somewhere in between there, but I don't really care which group was responsible for
Right.
finally getting it cleaned up. I'm just glad some pressure was put, and the result was we got some cleanup done. And I'm hopeful that we will move forward as a council with continued proactive enforcement. Um, and ultimately, if I can put a little plug in for what I think is the real solution, because I don't think what we're doing right now fixes the problems. I think the homeless solution for our state and probably nationwide, you can go back to the late '80s, not late '80s. I'm sorry, late '70s, when mental institutions went out of
Mm.
vogue nationwide, and they defunded them, they closed them, they shut them all down. And the result was now all we have for mental institutions are ones for the criminally insane. Um, we don't have ones for those folks that are just simply not able to take care of themselves. So the solution is to go back to allowing involuntary commitment to facilities for mentally ill. And I would even take it a step further and create drug detox and drug rehabilitation centers where we can take folks that are so addicted they can't see straight and commit them to those facilities to give them an opportunity to come clean of what has been, for lack of a better term, a demon in their life, this drug addiction.
Mm.
Um, and if we did that, because in my mind, I'm a Christian. You know that. I've been
Mm-hmm.
unabashedly willing to say that. And I just don't think it's humane to say we're not going to involuntarily commit people because we don't want to take their choice away from them. And instead, we're going to let them die slowly on the street. Something
But you
about
really,
it is just not right.
yeah, I agree. You really, though, you're talking about two different things, and I want to make sure I'm clear about both of them. There's those who are not mentally capable because of something in the way their brain functions versus those who are drug addicted. And I think I'm hearing you say two different solutions for those two different people. So going back to being able to involuntarily commit people with mental needs that maybe can't be treated, um, although many of them, I believe, can be treated with drugs, and then a different approach for those who are trying, well, who are addicted to drugs.
I actually think involuntary commitment for both would be a good idea.
Mm.
A
But
detox.
they wouldn't be going to the same place,
Oh,
right?
no,
So
no,
one
no.
would, okay,
No, no. Two different facilities,
gotcha,
one for mentally
got it.
ill and with experts there to treat that, and another is that is a detox facility that would allow them to be put in a drug addicted individual to be put in a detox area where they can't
Yeah.
they go through detox, get clean, and now they're thinking right again, and we can hopefully take them to the next steps. But right now, what we're doing instead is saying die on the streets. I mean, literally, we're giving them the food they need to can stay on the streets. We're giving them the money they need to stay on the streets. And now, with the navigation center coming to town, we're going to be giving them a roof over the head so they can stay on the streets. We're not really treating the real problem. And the reason we're not treating the real problem is because we don't want to take their rights away. But again, I say, how humane is it to let somebody just die on the streets? And that's essentially what we're doing.
Slowly,
Yeah.
slowly. Now, about a week ago, the News Register had two front page articles on. One was on Sheridan and their efforts to start looking at doing a homeless camp, and the other one was kind of a combination of looking at how Salem has put together several villages with tiny homes, like 8 foot by 8 foot, and actually is pretty interesting. Sounded like it's making progress. There, more specifically, in the case of Salem, that started in 2021, there's sort of a church and state combination where the city is paying for basically a church group to be the face and the people to work with those. And then it was implied that maybe McMinnville is looking at doing something like that, and maybe that's what you're talking about with the navigation center. Although the article itself talked about the biggest barrier to starting that is finding a place to put it, right? So the whole NIMBYism and dealing with, I don't want that near my school or near my neighborhood. Is that what, when you talk about the navigation center, is that going to ultimately be kind of like that tiny home thing, or is it something different?
So the Navigation Center is a low barrier shelter with
Right.
services at point of contact. So what that means in translation is right now YCAP's social services are located in their YCAP food housing bank building out on Dustin Court. What will be is all of those social services buildings or excuse me, personnel will be relocated to this new navigation center. The navigation center is already being built. So if you go down
Mm.
99 West from the police department, on your right hand side, you will see a chain link fence just past the karate facility around two buildings. Those two buildings will be the navigation center, and they're going to be building a piece in between to link that together so it's really one complex. Uh,
Wow.
it's about a $3 million project.
Mm.
Fortunately, one thing I'm glad about it is the bid that won was a local contractor rather than a Portland contractor, so that's good. But a low barrier shelter, for those who do not know, what that term indicates is that a person can come into that facility under the influence of any drug they want to be under. They can be in any shape they want to be in. They just can't do anything illegal while they're there. So they can't bring an amount of drugs that would be illegal, and they can't take them while they're there. But they can come as high as they want, and however they are, and stay the night there. The concept is that would be an overnight facility. The next
Mm.
step would be a transition out of the navigation center into Project Turnkey, which is the hotel on the south end of town. And
Okay.
that is a 1 to 6 month window for people to stay at. And then theoretically, they would be transitioned out of that into permanent housing. So this
And
is
that's low barrier also, or is it?
no, the only low barrier is navigation center. Uh,
Okay.
and and in terms of NIMBYism, that was addressed by the way in which low barrier or navigation centers were passed. I think it was H Bill 2000, House Bill 2005 in 2020. Ron Noble was a chief sponsor of that bill.
Mm.
Um, and basically, that bill said cities shall have these navigation centers I'm adding a few words, whether they want them or not, as long as you have a nonprofit that meets certain criteria willing to run them and take care of them. They're the ones doing it. The city doesn't own it. The nonprofit owns it. And we do. We have YCAP. And so, and that's regardless of the underlying zone for the land in which that building is going to be located at. And that's how they got rid of the NIMBYism, right? Because now the city doesn't have a choice. The residents don't have a choice, and the zone is irrelevant. So it can go anywhere. And we have a navigation center here. Newburgh has one, or at least they were working on one, also owned by YCAP.
There are also locals, like there's talk in Newburgh of creating a village of sorts, right? Mm-hmm. And that's being, I believe, sponsored by a church. I'm not sure if those are connected or disconnected or related to, like, because it feels like I'm feeling a little frustration from you about the one missing component in what is being done so far, and that's the addressing the drug detox needs. And I think George Humley talked about that too. He had a pretty specific plan in mind when he was running for city council. That and so you're there at those meetings. Have they talked about this, or are we prevented from being able to do it because it interferes with their choices?
So it has to be at the state level. The state has got to decide. The legislature has to decide that they're willing to go back to involuntary commitment. Right now, they're not willing to do that. And they've got their arguments that I think are solid. Really quickly, moving back to the tiny villages really fast. I think those are great. But again, those are addressing the needs of the invisible homeless. Those are addressing the needs of the people that actually are wanting help, will take the help, etc. They're not addressing the drug, because predominantly what you see on the streets, the visible homeless, are drug addicted, mentally ill, and what I would call vagabonds, vagrants, whatever terminology you want. But they do not want to live by society's rules. They do not want to pay rent. They do not want a water bill. They do not want an electric bill. They do not want to be in a apartment. They want to be in that trailer. They're happy there. And so you're not going to tiny village them because then they're going to have to pay all these bills that they're trying to avoid paying by living in a trailer.
Got it.
So, and that's one of the reasons I think the solution is get the drug addicted off the street, get the mentally ill off the street, and what's left? The people that don't want to follow society's rules. And I don't think anybody would disagree with saying, well, those folks, we can just move on. They don't need to stay in our community. If they don't want to live by our rules, we don't need to take care of them. They can go find a place to live someplace else. And I know that sounds hard, but they don't want to live by these rules. So why should we have to pay as taxpayers for them, subsidize their desire to live that way? And so tiny homes don't address that. Tiny homes are addressing an entirely different group.
Got it.
In terms of my frustration level is this whole concept is the Democratic Party of Oregon, by and large, most of the candidates that run under that party flag oppose involuntary commitment. And they do so because they see that as being creating another layer of harm to the individual who they're trying to help, right? So if you continue to harm them, then you can't get to the bottom layers of the problem and resolve that problem. So it causes another trauma is the term they actually use in clinical terms. So if I involuntarily take them off the streets and put them in a building they don't want to be in, I've just inflicted another trauma to them, and it's going to make it much harder to help them. I get the argument, but the question for me becomes, well, what's better, letting them die on the street slowly, or inflicting a little bit of harm now by taking their rights away so we can get them in a place where we can take care of them?
Yeah. Good point.
And I keep bringing this up because I want to drill this message out into the public as much as I possibly can. In terms of, you asked a while back in this conversation, how is McMinnville doing? Are we doing better or worse on dealing with the homeless population? I will say this to that question. I have had a business on the corner of 3rd and Johnson my family has had it since 1987. We've been in that building. we did not see a homeless person ever sleeping on our property until the last year.
Hmm.
Had that happen now 5 times in the last year. We've been tagged. We've never been tagged before. We this last week we had 3 people that were sleeping along the side of our building, and they left a bag of empty needles. Never seen that before. So I know that's anecdotal, but my take based on my anecdotal experience would be things right now, or at least in the last year, have been worse than what they were before.
Well, and I always think that our drug laws in Oregon are a major contributor. I mean, people can say all they want, but I think marijuana is a gateway drug for sure. And I've just recently learned that you can get really strong things that have THC in them that can bring out psychoses, etc., that you wouldn't necessarily have as many people accessing if it wasn't legalized, and then all the other crazy stuff that was legalized uh, on top of all that. That's just shooting yourselves in the foot, almost like planned destruction of society. And that's just me. You
Well,
can't say that, but I'm saying it. Somebody is not thinking straight.
well, I'm going to give you a little personal history about me that a lot of people may not know. So I started smoking marijuana when I was 13 or 14 years old, and I smoked it almost daily until I was 27 years old. Um, I know there's a lot of debate over whether marijuana is a gateway drug. And let me say to those who don't think it is, let me give you some food for thought. When um, I went to public school, it was during the Just Say No to Drugs time frame. And so there was a lot of that messaging going on. And they told you how horrible marijuana was. Then I smoked it for the first time.
And it wasn't.
It wasn't. It was
Nope.
nothing like what they told me it was going to be. In fact,
Right.
alcohol was far worse in my
Mm.
experience. That's just my experience. I was raised in an environment in which alcohol was prevalent. Um, and um, so as a young person, smoking marijuana for the first time, it's really not a big deal. What does that do in my brain about all the other drugs they're telling me are a big
Right.
um, and
Exactly.
And so for me, I can tell you, I could go through the list. I can't count on one hand the number of drugs I tried during that window of time between the age of 14 and 27. Um,
And they were available because once you get around other people who are,
correct.
because I did the same thing, they all have it and they say, here, you don't even have to pay for it.
Right. Right. And so you try it just to try it. And fortunately, I never tried heroin. Fortunately, I never stuck a needle in my arm. All the drugs I tried either went in my nose or in my mouth. Okay, I'm being
Yeah.
a little too graphic maybe than I should be, but I want to be transparent. The
Everybody knows.
area. I showed up at a Yamhill County Commission meeting recently to thank them for looking at trying to do something to help fund and deal with the opioid epidemic
Yes.
that is grappling our society right now. It is sad what I'm seeing, and when it comes to fentanyl, their fentanyl oftentimes is made to look like a different type of drug, and to a
Right.
first time user, it can kill them. So it's a
Yep.
once and done situation where, in my day and age, you might get hooked, but you didn't die. Um, it's a whole
Right.
different world today. But anyway, so I showed up
Sure is.
because of this passion, because of what I went through as a kid, how long I was strung out on drugs. And I would also say this to those of you who think that marijuana is not a dangerous drug. The other thing I hear is it's not a gateway drug and it's not addictive. Well, I'm going to tell you that that's not my experience. My experience is marijuana was incredibly addictive. Now, maybe it wasn't when it was the plant growing alongside the railroad track and you just pulled a little bit off of there. But when these dealers and growers started making it stronger and stronger and stronger and stronger and stronger, that stuff is very addictive. And it also does something to your thinking, your mindset. Um, so I think we've made a mistake going down the path that we've gone on marijuana.
Hmm.
And I know we've made a mistake on Measure 110. I know there's a lot of appetite. I think from what I'm hearing, there's bipartisan appetite to address some of the failings of 110. 110 was, which for those who don't know, that legalized small amounts or made it a misdemeanor with a fine for small amounts of hard drugs. Um, that has been devastating. Um,
Yep.
so I have heard there's bipartisan appetite to address that in Salem. So I hope that plays out in the short session this year.
Well, I'll just send prayers as I'm talking to you and the city council and the mayor and the folks that are employed in the city as they continue to try to do the wise and the right thing. I would sure be interested in, and I've tried before, talking to other folks on the city council. I reached out once to Sal Peralta and once to the mayor, and I didn't find any interest in appearing with me on the show. I promise I wouldn't beat anybody up. I just ask questions like I ask you. Um,
I hope they will take you up on it. I can tell you, since I got involved in politics, I made it a personal choice that if anybody asks to interview me, I'm going to say yes. I don't evaluate whether you're on my side or you're going to be friendly to me or not. I just feel like if the public wants to ask me questions as their representative, I should come and answer their questions. Uh,
mhm,
so I've been interviewed by News Register, NPR, which I thought was really cool that NPR actually wanted to interview me for
for sure.
and of course by you multiple times. I, and and I have found so far everybody that's interviewed me has been mostly fair in their representation of what I said. And as long as that's the case, I'll go back to them. You know, my
Hmm.
I think that's a good way to handle this. And I wish my fellow counselors would have this kind of attitude. I'll be willing to come before anybody until you prove to me I shouldn't. I think that's a right way to do it.
When's your next city council meeting? It's twice a month, right? Tuesdays?
It's the second and fourth Tuesday of the month.
Okay.
Is our regular city council. And for our citizens that might be listening to this, you can come to any of these. At the beginning of the meeting, we'll give every citizen, well, actually roughly 10 citizens per meeting, because we only do this for a half hour. But we'll give anybody that wants to 3 minutes to talk about anything they want to talk about. So you want to come talk about the homelessness or the houseless issue? You can come talk for 3 minutes. If you want to come talk about rats in your basement, you can come talk about rats in your basement
Right.
for 3 minutes. It doesn't matter. You can have whatever you want to talk about. I would really encourage. We are blessed in this country to have a democracy system where people can come and tell us what they think. There may come a day where we don't. So while we have it, take advantage of it. Your
Hmm.
voice is more valuable than you realize. When you come before at least this city councilor, I'm going to follow that up as everyone that's come before us, except for in major, huge hearings where we had 100 people coming before us. But any individual came before us on a specific issue, I have followed that up after the meeting. You will get your time with me. Um, take advantage of it.
Well, thank you so much for your service and for appearing with me. Is there any closing comments?
No, I just want to say thank you to you, Todd. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to do this. Thank you for asking me tough questions. I know some people think these may sound like softball questions, but they're not, because I
Mm.
have to think through the answers, and I appreciate that. Thank you for being another place in McMinnville where politicians or public officials, whatever you want to call us, can come before you and answer questions. And for viewers, please submit questions to Todd. Um, I
For
would
sure.
I would love to answer what you want me to answer. I may not have all the answers, but I'll give you what I know.
Chris, you know a lot of stuff. I think you are, what's the word? You're listening to a lot of things all the time and trying to stay well informed on many, many topics. So I feel like I could throw you any question and you'd have some form of an answer or you'd know where to get it. The next topic I'd like to talk with you sometime, if possible, would be the recreation center That's kind of a big deal.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so maybe that'll just be a teaser for next time.
Sounds good.
Well, maybe I'll see you at the next city council meeting, Chris, and I hope we'll see a few others for their 3 minutes of fame.
I hope to see you there.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, of liberty and justice for all.
All right, ready?